She put me out on the street the day after my son's funeral, announcing that the house was hers now. At the will reading, she actually laughed. "Hope you enjoy being homeless, Eleanor." Then the attorney opened the sealed envelope. "If you're watching, subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. And if stories about karma hit your sweet spot, tap that like button. Because this story is about exactly that. Sometimes the best revenge isn't doing anything at all. It's letting people expose who they really are." It started with a phone call at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. David's voice was panicked, shallow, barely holding together. "Mom, something's wrong. My chest. I can't." The line went dead. By the time I reached the hospital, my 45-year-old son was gone. "Massive heart attack," the doctor said calmly, professionally. Nothing they could do. Stephanie stood beside me in the harsh fluorescent light of the waiting room. Her face looked stunned, carefully arranged into the shape of grief. But there was something else there too, something I didn't want to name. Relief? No. I told myself that was impossible. Grief plays tricks on the mind. "What happens now?" I whispered, still unable to accept that David, healthy, energetic, full of plans, was suddenly just gone. Stephanie straightened her back. For a split second, her mask slipped. "Now we deal with reality," she said coolly. "David's gone, Eleanor. And I have decisions to make." A chill ran through me. Stephanie and I had never been especially close, but David had always been the bridge between us. With him gone, that bridge collapsed, and I was beginning to see just how wide the gap truly was. "Of course," I said softly, reaching for her hand. "We'll get through this together." She pulled away. "We'll see." I should have heard the warning in that sentence. Instead, I excused it as shock. People grieve differently, I told myself. Some fall apart. Others shut down. Stephanie clearly shut down. The next 3 days disappeared into funeral planning. I offered to help pay for everything. David was my only child, but Stephanie insisted on handling it herself. "I'm his wife," she kept saying. "I know what he would have wanted." So I focused on what I could do, writing his eulogy, calling relatives, holding myself together. At 67, I had already buried my parents and my husband. But losing a child is a different kind of pain. There's no order to it. It feels wrong in your bones. The night before the funeral, I sat alone in what had once been David's childhood bedroom, the room he'd kept when he and Stephanie bought the house. My eyes drifted to the framed photos on the dresser. David at his college graduation. David and Stephanie on their wedding day. David holding his nephew last Christmas. What I didn't see stopped me cold. There were no recent photos of David and me. Stephanie had removed them. I couldn't remember when it happened, only that it had. A quiet knock pulled me from my thoughts. Stephanie stood in the doorway, no longer hiding the sharp, assessing look in her eyes. "We need to talk, Eleanor." The funeral itself was beautiful. I'll give her that. Elegant flowers. David's favorite hymns. A perfectly planned reception. What wasn't beautiful was watching my daughter-in-law perform grief while talking openly about moving on and new beginnings. I was standing in the receiving line when I overheard her whispering to her sister behind the flower arrangements. "The life insurance alone covers the mortgage for at least 2 years," she said. "And without the extra expenses." "Extra expenses?" "What about Eleanor?" her sister asked. "Where will she go?" Stephanie laughed. Sharp. Dismissive. "That's not my problem anymore. She's an adult. She can figure it out." My blood went cold. I had lived with them for 2 years. Ever since I sold my own home to help with their down payment. David promised it would be temporary, just until I found something smaller. Temporary turned into routine. Cooking meals. Keeping the house running. Being useful. Apparently, I had misunderstood my place. Eleanor, Stephanie said brightly, appearing at my side. Can you help me in the kitchen? There are a few things we need to discuss. I followed her past mourners and condolences, past my sister who was flying home the next morning. Stephanie closed the kitchen door behind us and turned, businesslike. I'll be straightforward, she said. The house was in David's name. That makes it mine now. I need space to grieve without complications. Complications? I repeated, my heart pounding. You living here isn't working anymore, she said calmly. I need my privacy. The words hit like a punch. Stephanie, I understand you're hurting, but surely we can. No, she raised a hand. I've decided. You have until tomorrow evening to pack. I searched her face for the woman who once called me mom. Who hugged me at holidays. Who cried when David proposed. She was gone. Where do you expect me to go? I asked. She shrugged. You're grown, Eleanor. You'll figure it out. The cruelty of it stole my breath. David would never. David is dead, she said flatly. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. That night, I packed my entire life into 4 suitcases and 2 boxes. 67 years of life reduced to what could fit in the trunk of my car. As I folded my clothes and carefully wrapped the few remaining photographs I still had, I kept expecting Stephanie to come upstairs, to apologize, to say she had spoken in grief, that of course I could stay until I found somewhere else. She never came. Instead, exactly at 6 p.m. The next day, she appeared in the doorway, arms crossed like a gatekeeper. Time's up, Eleanor. I zipped the last suitcase shut and scanned the room that had been my refuge for the past 2 years. The walls were bare, stripped of the personal touches I'd been allowed. It looked like a guest room again, which, I supposed, it had always been. I'll need a few more minutes to get everything to the car, I said. I'll help you. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. Stephanie wanted me gone, and she wanted to make it fast. We made 3 trips in silence. As I loaded the last box into the car, I turned, maybe to plead with whatever remained of her humanity. I know you're angry at me for some reason, I said quietly. I wish I knew what I did wrong so I could fix it. Stephanie's face didn't soften. You didn't do anything wrong. Eleanor, you just exist in my space. In my life. In my way. David felt sorry for you, but I don't. Her blunt honesty hit harder than any polite lie could have. Somehow, it felt cleaner. I see, I said, climbing into the driver's seat. I rolled down the window. Will you at least tell me if there's going to be a formal reading of David's will? I assume he left something. Why would he leave you anything? Stephanie asked, genuinely puzzled. You're not his wife. And it's not like you ever contributed financially to our household. The irony was sharp enough to make me smile. $40,000 I'd contributed to their down payment begged to differ, but apparently Stephanie had either conveniently forgotten, or convinced herself it had been a gift. Of course, I said. Silly of me to assume. I drove away without looking back, heading for the Hampton Inn on Route 9, the only place I could afford while I figured out my next move. In the rearview mirror, I watched Stephanie stand in the driveway until the car disappeared around the corner. At the hotel, I checked in for a week, lugging my suitcases into a generic room that smelled like industrial cleaner and broken plans. I sat on the polyester bedspread and studied my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. Who was this woman staring back? A widow. Now childless, homeless, and apparently worthless in the eyes of the only family I had left. And yet, something unexpected began to stir inside me. Not despair, not yet. Something sharper, something that felt like anticipation. Stephanie thought she had won. That she had discarded the inconvenient mother-in-law and claimed her prize. She didn't know that David had been a better son than she ever realized. 2 weeks into my hotel stay, Just as my savings were starting to feel alarmingly thin, the phone rang. Mrs. Fairfield? This is James Morrison from Morrison and Associates. I handled your son's legal affairs. Yes, Mr. Morrison. I'm calling to inform you that the probate process is complete. There will be a formal reading of David's will next Tuesday at 2 p.m. in my office. Your presence is required. Required. My heart skipped. I'm sorry, I think there's been a mistake. Stephanie seemed to think. Mr. Morrison interrupted gently. I can only tell you what David's will specifies. It explicitly names you as a beneficiary. I'll see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. I stared at my phone for a long moment. David had left me something. Something meaningful. Maybe a small keepsake, a watch, a photo album from our shared past. Stephanie would not be pleased, but she'd have to accept it. I spent the weekend scouring listings online, senior living communities, modest one-bedroom apartments, anything within budget. My savings could cover another week at the hotel, plus first month's rent and a security deposit. Careful planning was essential. Social Security and a small pension would have to stretch further than anticipated. At 1:45 p.m. On Tuesday, I sat in the parking lot of Morrison and Associates, watching Stephanie emerge from a silver BMW in a black dress that likely cost more than my monthly rent. She brought a companion, a sharply dressed man who constantly checked his phone. Inside, Stephanie's expression darkened when she saw me. What is she doing here? She hissed at the receptionist. Mrs. Fairfield is here for the will reading, the young woman replied calmly. Stephanie's voice rose. Which Mrs. Fairfield? Both of you, apparently, the receptionist answered. Her companion leaned over, whispered something, and she nodded curtly, taking a seat across from me. Any trace of civility that had existed was gone. At exactly 2 p.m., Mr. Morrison appeared, a kind-faced man in his 60s with silver hair and gentle eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, the type of lawyer who still believed in doing right by his clients. Ladies, gentlemen, he began, settling behind his mahogany desk, I know this is a difficult time. David was very specific about his wishes. I will read the will in its entirety, and then we can address any questions. Stephanie leaned forward eagerly, hands clasped in her lap. Marcus, her brother, pulled out a legal pad, ready to take notes. I simply folded my hands and waited. The first portion of the will went exactly as expected. Stephanie inherited the house, the cars, David's retirement accounts, and his life insurance. She nodded with satisfaction, occasionally glancing at me as if to relish her triumph. Then Mr. Morrison's tone shifted. I knew we were approaching the most important part. There is, however, one final provision, he said. David added it just 3 months ago. Stephanie's nodding ceased. She leaned forward, eyes sharp, suddenly alert. Marcus set his pen down, and I found myself holding my breath. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat and continued reading. To my mother, Eleanor Fairfield, who generously provided the down payment for our home and has never requested repayment, I leave the contents of Safety Deposit Box E3 through D7 at First National Bank, along with all documentation and account information contained therein. Stephanie's voice cut sharply through the room. What safety deposit box? David never mentioned a safety deposit box. Mr. Morrison looked up from the document. Apparently, it was something he maintained privately. He was very specific that the contents should go to Mrs. Fairfield. I felt a jolt of surprise, though for entirely different reasons than Stephanie. David had never mentioned a safety deposit box to me either. What could he have placed there just for me? What's in it? Marcus asked, lawyer instincts kicking in. I honestly don't know, Mr. Morrison replied. David simply provided the bank information and instructions that Mrs. Fairfield should have full access upon his death. Stephanie's face flushed with fury. This is ridiculous. If there's anything valuable in that box, it should be part of the estate. We need to contest this. You're welcome to try, Mr. Morrison said evenly. But the provision is clear, and David was fully competent when he added it to his will. I witnessed the document myself. When did he add this? I asked quietly. Mr. Morrison checked his notes. 3 months ago, February 15th. He came in specifically to make this addition. I remembered that day vividly. The day after Valentine's Day. David had been unusually quiet at dinner while Stephanie complained about something trivial, the neighbor's dog, I think. He barely spoke the entire meal. Stephanie snapped, standing abruptly. This is a waste of time. Marcus, let's go. We'll file a challenge tomorrow. Actually, Mr. Morrison said, pulling out another document, before you leave, I need to inform you both that David left explicit instructions for his mother regarding the contents of the safety deposit box. Mrs. Fairfield, he wanted you to access it within the next few days, once you've completed the necessary paperwork with the bank. He handed me a sealed envelope. These are the bank documents and his personal key. The bank will need to verify the death certificate and process the forms before you can access the box, usually 3 business days. Stephanie's eyes were fixed on the envelope like a hawk stalking prey. I'm coming with you to the bank, she said. That won't be possible, Mr. Morrison interjected. Safety deposit box access is restricted to Mrs. Eleanor Fairfield only. Bank policy. Stephanie sputtered. This is insane. How do we even know there's anything of value in there? It could be empty, or just sentimental junk. I stood, holding the envelope firmly. I suppose we'll find out next week. As we walked out of the office, I felt her gaze burning into my back. In the parking lot, she stepped in front of me beside my car. Eleanor, let's be reasonable. Whatever's in that box, we should share it. David would have wanted his wife to benefit from anything he left. For the first time since David's death, I almost smiled. You made it very clear you didn't think David would leave me anything. And now suddenly you're concerned about sharing? I'm just saying. You're saying whatever you think will get you access to that box, I interrupted, unlocking my car. David was specific. The contents are mine. Her carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. Don't forget, Eleanor. You're homeless. You need my goodwill more than I need yours. I paused with my hand on the car door. Actually, Stephanie, I don't think I need anything from you at all. 3 business days later, after submitting the death certificate and completing the bank paperwork, I finally stood before Safety Deposit Box 3537 at First National Bank. The bank manager, Mrs. Peterson, was expecting me. She offered her condolences and personally escorted me to the vault. Box 337 is one of our larger units, Mrs. Peterson explained as we walked through the security doors. Your son rented it about 5 years ago and visited regularly. 5 years? David had been planning this for 5 years. She used her master key while I inserted David's, and the box slid open effortlessly. It was large, roughly the size of a briefcase, and surprisingly heavy. Take all the time you need, Mrs. Peterson said, guiding me to a private viewing room. I'll be at my desk when you're finished. Alone in the small, windowless room, I lifted the lid. The first thing inside was a letter in David's familiar handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. Mom, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And Stephanie has probably already shown you exactly who she really is. I'm sorry for that, but I'm not surprised. I've known for years what kind of person I married, and I've been preparing for this possibility. My heart raced as I continued reading. You gave us $40,000 for our house down payment. I know you thought of it as a loan, though you never asked for repayment. I've been investing that money for the past 5 years, adding to it whenever possible. The funds in the accompanying accounts aren't just repayment, they are what careful investing has grown them into. I set the letter down with shaking hands and looked at the documents beneath it. Bank statements, investment portfolios, account information. My eyes scanned the balance sheets, trying to comprehend the numbers. $185,000 spread across several investment accounts, all in my name, all fully accessible with the proper documentation. I picked up David's letter again, disbelief thick in my throat. Stephanie has been telling people, you contribute nothing to our household. What she doesn't mention is that our mortgage has been automatically paid from my salary account the entire time you've lived with us. Any money you gave went straight into investments for your future. The letter continued. I've been documenting everything, Mom, every email, every text, every casual remark she's made about you. It's all in the folder labeled documentation. I thought you should know what kind of person has been living in our house. My vision blurred as I reached for the folder. Inside were printed emails, screenshots of texts, even photographs of credit card statements, evidence of years of manipulation and deceit. The final paragraph made tears fill my eyes. You deserve so much better than the way she treated you. Take this money and build a life where no one can ever make you feel unwanted again. And Mom, don't tell Stephanie about any of this until you're safely away from her. Trust me on this one. All my love. David. I sat in that small room for nearly an hour, poring over everything David had left for me. By the time I emerged, I knew exactly how my daughter-in-law had been manipulating both of us for years. Mrs. Peterson helped me transfer the documents into a large envelope and explained how to access the investment accounts. As I walked to my car, my phone rang. Eleanor, Stephanie's voice rang, falsely sweet. I was wondering if you'd like to come by for lunch today. Maybe we could discuss what you found in the safety deposit box. I smiled at my reflection in the car window. That's very generous, Stephanie. I'll be there at noon. It was time for her to learn that the people you underestimate are often the ones who surprise you most. I arrived at Stephanie's house, well, her house now, exactly at noon, carrying a small gift bag and my best poker face. She answered the door in a flowing white dress, expensive-looking and perfectly styled. All smiles and feigned warmth. Eleanor, I'm so glad you came. I made your favorite chicken salad. Funny how she suddenly remembered my preferences now that she wanted something from me. The dining room was immaculate, wedding china, fresh flowers, every detail designed to project civility. She poured iced tea and chattered about the weather while I watched her carefully, waiting for her to reveal her true intention. Finally, she leaned back in her chair with that practiced grace and said, I've been thinking about yesterday, about the safety deposit box. Have you? I sipped my tea calmly. I know we've had our differences, but David would want us to support each other through this difficult time. Family should stick together. Family. Coming from the woman who had thrown me out the day after her husband's funeral. I nodded evenly. I couldn't agree more. Her eyes lit up, convinced she'd found an opening. I'm so relieved to hear you say that. I was worried you'd be angry about having to find your own place so quickly, but you understand I needed space to grieve. I took a bite of the chicken salad. Grief affects everyone differently, I said. Exactly, she replied, leaning forward. So, about what David left you. I was thinking we could combine resources. Whatever's in that box, plus his life insurance, maybe invest it together. I have some excellent financial advisors. I smiled, inwardly amused. Of course she does. The same ones who helped her make all those questionable spending decisions. That's very thoughtful of you, Stephanie, I said, setting down my fork, but I have to ask, what made you think there was anything valuable in that safety deposit box? She hesitated, clearly caught off guard. Well, David was always private about certain financial matters. He must have had a reason for keeping something separate. Private, I echoed, leaning back slightly. Interesting choice of words. You know what I mean? She waved a hand dismissively. Men and their financial planning. They never tell us wives everything. I looked her squarely in the eye. Actually, Stephanie, I think David told you exactly as much as he thought you needed to know. Something flickered in her eyes, uncertainty, maybe a hint of fear. "What did you find in the box, Eleanor?" she asked, her voice tighter now. The moment of truth was approaching, but I wasn't ready to play that card just yet. Instead, I reached for the gift bag I had brought. "I brought you something," I said, pulling out a small, neatly wrapped package. "A little thank you gift." She unwrapped it eagerly. Inside was a framed photo of David on his college graduation day. Her expression softened slightly. "Oh, Eleanor, this is lovely." "Thank you. I thought you should have it," I said evenly. "After all, you were such a devoted wife." The emphasis on devoted didn't go unnoticed. Her eyes narrowed, searching my face for hidden meaning. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all," I replied. "Just acknowledging how well you took care of my son." Stephanie set the photo down carefully, her smile slipping. Weariness was replacing the polished sweetness. "Eleanor, you're being cryptic. Just tell me, what was in the safety deposit box?" I took another sip of tea, savoring the moment. "Mostly documents. Very interesting reading material." "What kind of documents?" she asked, leaning in. "Oh, you know. Financial records, investment statements, some correspondence." I paused meaningfully. "Quite a few printed emails and text messages." Her color drained. "Text messages?" "Yes," I said lightly. David was meticulous about documentation, especially toward the end. I pulled out my phone and showed her the first screenshot David had captured, her texting her sister. "God, I can't wait until that old bat finally moves out. Then we can turn her room into the home gym I've been wanting." Stephanie lunged for my phone, but I pulled it back smoothly. "There are dozens more," I said casually. "This next one's particularly enlightening." I swiped to a new screenshot, her messaging Marcus about convincing David I should contribute to household expenses when the mortgage was already covered by his salary. "Stop," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "And then there's the email where you laugh with your sister about how gullible I am," I continued, showing her the screen. "About how easy it was to make me feel like a burden, even though you were planning to kick me out after David passed." I placed the phone on the table and looked at her calmly. "Forward thinking of you, really. Planning my eviction while David was still alive." Her composure finally cracked. "He had no right to save private messages." "Actually," I said evenly, "he had every right. It was his house, and you were discussing his mother." I leaned back in my chair. "The question now is, what are we going to do about this situation? What do you want?" Her mask had completely slipped. "Want? I don't want anything from you, Eleanor. I never did." "Then why are you doing this? What's the point of humiliating me?" I considered her carefully. "You know, you're right. There's no point in humiliating you. You've already done that perfectly yourself." "I don't understand." "You threw me out the day after my son's funeral. You told me I was worthless, that David felt sorry for me, that I'd contributed nothing." I stood slowly. "Here's what you didn't understand about David. He saw everything, every cruel comment, every manipulation, every lie you told." Stephanie gripped the table edge, knuckles white. "And you want to know the truly beautiful part?" I continued. "He documented all of it, not to hurt you, but to protect me. Because he knew that once he was gone, you'd show your true colors." "You can't prove any of this in court." I laughed softly. "Court? Oh, sweetie. I'm not taking you to court." She blinked, confused. "You're not? Why would you?" "You've already given me everything I need," I said. I pulled the folder from David's safety deposit box and placed it on the table between us. "David left me more than screenshots, Stephanie. He left 5 years' worth of evidence showing exactly how you manipulated both of us." She stared at the folder as if it might bite her. Bank statements proving the house payments were automatically deducted from David's salary the entire time I lived there. Email chains between you and Marcus discussing how to handle the Eleanor situation. Credit card statements showing luxury purchases made the same days you claimed we couldn't afford basics. Her breathing grew shallow. David saved all of that, I said firmly. Even emails to your friends, calling him a pushover and joking about how easy it was to manipulate him into thinking I was a burden. Stephanie flinched, as if I'd slapped her. You want to know what I found most interesting? I continued, opening the folder. This email thread between you and Marcus, discussing long-term plans to declare me incompetent so you could access my pension and Social Security. She opened her mouth to protest. No, you never actually carried through, I said. Do you know why? Because David figured out your plan and took every step necessary to protect me. Stephanie's eyes widened. What steps? You don't have anything worth protecting, do you? I smiled pleasantly. That's interesting, because according to these investment statements, I apparently have quite a bit worth protecting. Money that David carefully grew over the past 5 years. That's impossible. You're living in a hotel. I'm living in a hotel because I choose to be here while I plan my next move, not because I can't afford better. The silence stretched between us. I could practically see her calculating, trying to figure out just how much money we were talking about. How much? She finally asked. Excuse me, how much money did David leave you? I closed the folder and stood. That's really none of your business, isn't it? I'm his wife. I have a right to know. You had a right to know what your husband left you, which, as I recall, was quite generous. The house, the cars, the life insurance, his retirement accounts. I'd say you did very well for yourself. Stephanie shot to her feet, chair scraping against the hardwood. You manipulative old witch. You're trying to steal what's rightfully mine. Steal? I raised an eyebrow. How exactly would I be stealing anything? Everything I have was given to me by my son, who had every legal right to distribute his assets as he saw fit. He was my son. Yes, he was, she spat, fury and panic flickering across her face. And apparently he knew exactly what kind of wife you were. The words hung between us like a gauntlet thrown. I want to see those bank statements, she demanded. I'm sure you do, Stephanie. But you've already seen enough to know the truth. You're warning me? I laughed, a clear, liberating sound. Stephanie, honey, you threw me out of your house. You humiliated me at my son's funeral. You made it clear that in your eyes, I was worthless and unwanted. And now you think you can threaten me? She stared at me, recalibrating. The threats had failed, so she shifted tactics. Eleanor, please, let's be reasonable about this, she said, voice pleading. I know I've been difficult since David died. I was grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. But we're family. We should work together. Family, I repeated thoughtfully. Yes, you mentioned that before. Right after you told me David felt sorry for me, and that I'd never contributed anything to your household. I didn't mean that, she said quickly. I was upset. I said things I didn't mean. Oh, but you did mean them, I said gently. And that's what makes David's documentation so valuable. He saved your words, over and over, to multiple people, over years. Her mask slipped again. What do you want from me, Eleanor? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I'm sorry I asked you to leave. I'm sorry for everything. Now can we discuss this money situation like adults? There's nothing to discuss. Of course there is. If David left you a significant sum, we need to plan how to manage it responsibly. I know excellent financial advisors. I could help you invest it properly. You mean, you could help me spend it properly? That's not what I said, I replied evenly. It's what you meant, she shot back. I picked up my purse. Stephanie, let me be very clear. The money David left me isn't an inheritance that fell into my lap. It's the return on the $40,000 I lent you for your house down payment, plus 5 years of careful investment. Her mouth fell open. $40,000? Did you think it was a gift? That I just handed over my life savings out of the goodness of my heart? David said it was a family contribution, I said quietly. He was preserving your pride, and mine, but he never forgot it was a loan. I could see her mind working, trying to calculate. If I'd invested $40,000 5 years ago, and David had been growing it, how much is it now? She whispered. I pulled out my phone and opened one of the banking apps David had set up. The account balance filled the screen. I turned it toward her. $185,000. Her face went white. She grabbed the edge of the table for support. That's impossible. David was a careful investor, I said calmly, and apparently very motivated to make sure his mother was taken care of. But, that's almost as much as the life insurance policy. That should be part of the estate. It should be split between us. Should it? On what legal principle? Because I'm his mother, and you're just his wife, I said, letting the words land slowly. The casual cruelty in her tone, just his mother, hit like a physical blow. But instead of pain, I felt clarity. You know what, Stephanie? You're right. I am just his mother. The woman who gave birth to him, raised him, supported him through college, and lent him the down payment for the house where you threw me out like garbage. I stood, slung my purse over my shoulder, and apparently that was all David needed to ensure I'd never have to rely on anyone's charity again. Wait. Stephanie called as I reached the door. Eleanor, wait. We can work this out. Please, just sit down. Let's talk rationally. I paused in the doorway, turning to face her. And what exactly do you think needs to be worked out? The money situation, our relationship, everything. Her words came fast, edged with panic. Look, I know I made mistakes. I was stressed about David's death, worried about finances, and I took it out on you. But we can fix this. I'm sure you were worried about finances, I said quietly, but not for the reasons you're claiming. What's that supposed to mean? I reached for one final document from David's folder, the one I'd been saving. It means David also documented your spending habits, Stephanie, including the $15,000 you charged to credit cards in the month before he died. Her face drained of color. Spa treatments, designer clothes, a weekend in New York with your sister. All while telling David you were concerned about money for groceries. That's not, she stammered. I know, I interrupted. You weren't worried. You were planning to live off his life insurance while discarding the inconvenient mother-in-law who might interfere with your lifestyle. Stephanie slumped back in her chair, the fight leaving her. You don't understand the pressure I was under, she whispered. What pressure? I asked, incredulous. Everyone expected you to be the perfect wife, the perfect hostess, David's colleagues, the neighbors, your family. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is to maintain appearances? She sat there, in her designer dress, in her luxurious house, surrounded by everything she could want, complaining about appearances. No, Stephanie, I don't, I said firmly. Because I was too busy actually taking care of your husband while you were busy spending his money. I loved David. You loved what David could provide for you. There's a difference. Now she was crying, ugly tears smearing her perfect makeup. I can't lose everything. I can't go back to being nobody. You're not nobody, Stephanie, I said. You're David's widow. You inherited a $500,000 house, a $200,000 life insurance policy, and his retirement accounts. You're financially set for life if you manage it wisely. But it's not enough for the life I planned. Then maybe you planned the wrong life. I walked toward the door again, and this time she didn't stop me with words. Instead, there was a soft thud behind me. I turned to see her slumped forward in her chair, her face pale, breathing shallow. For a moment, I worried she was having a medical emergency. Then I realized, this was something else entirely. Complete defeat. The moment someone understands they've lost everything they thought they were entitled to. And no manipulation, charm, or cruelty can bring it back. I can't, she whispered. I can't lose everything. You're not losing everything, Stephanie, I said, my voice calm. You're losing the things that were never yours to begin with. I left her there, in her expensive dining room, surrounded by wedding china and a carefully constructed life, and stepped out into the sunlight of my new beginning. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's justice served at precisely the right moment. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it comes with a healthy bank balance, and the knowledge that the child you raised became exactly the person you hoped he would. David had taken care of me, just as he promised he always would. Even from beyond the grave, my son had kept his word. And more than any amount of money, that was the greatest gift he could have given me. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.